I have such fond memories of reading to our children when they were young. I've kept our favourite children's board books and don't tell anyone, I still read them occasionally. I wonder how you might make your own children's board book. Let's work it out. I naively thought this was going to be an easy project. I expected the internet to be full of videos on how to make these. There are heaps of videos on how to publish one, how to write it, do the artwork, format it, and then send it off to have a machine make it. But I couldn't find anything on how to make one by hand. Getting ahead of myself, I looked for something to bind. I'm not a children's author, and I didn't have time to find something out of copyright and make a nice edited copy. So I went to the Internet Archive to find the PDF of a children's book. I was looking for something less than 30 pages, with bright pictures and large writing. The Three Little Pigs met 2 of the 3 criteria. I downloaded the PDF for Three Little Pigs and printed it on a heavy 200 GSM paper. The details of the paper are in the description. I bought an A4 long grain paper which I cut in half to get A5 short grain paper that will fold down to A6. Many board books are fairly small. The main trick is to print single-sided and 2 pages per sheet. I show the print settings in the video. What I'm going to do is fold all these sheets that I've printed into single folios and then laminate them together with a piece of thick card or thin board between each. I cut a heap of A6 long grain 600 GSM card to use in this lamination. This is not how the commercially machine-made board books are made. I'm about to learn the hard way that these books are much more sophisticated than they appear. Maybe now is the time to look at one of the commercially made ones. The first thing to note is the covering style. It's similar to the breakaway spine often used with the Gary Frost sewn boards binding, but it only breaks away at the back of the book. This leaves the front unblemished from a crease. I couldn't find a commercial name for this covering style, but the breakaway spine on both front and back is called Otterbind or Libretto, and probably other names depending on whose machines and commercial system you're using. If we look very closely at the text, you can see it's a stack of folded card laminated together. The printing is on the card. The fold is of card, not paper. In my handmade version, the spine fold is of paper, and that's one of the weaknesses over the commercial version. I'll talk more about this once the repetitive gluing starts. I'll finish cutting the board while the printing finishes, then I'll go upstairs and grab the printed sheets and then fold them individually. Single sheet sections or signatures with the text inward. Once I've folded all the single sheet sections, it's time to get gluing. There's a lot of gluing in this project, and this is the perfect job for a roller. I get asked about using rollers a lot, and this is finally my chance to prove that I can use one. And it just happens I did a workshop with Ben Elbel last month where we used rollers, and as part of the course kit I got this nice stainless steel roller that Ben brought with him from France. It's much nicer than the nasty cheap Bunnings ones that rust. My first couple of attempts at making these were a mess. I couldn't get the spines aligned well enough. I could get really close, but close is just not good enough for this book. In desperation, I made a jig from a couple of pieces of scrap wood, which worked fantastic. Using the jig, the spine was as flat as the commercially made ones. If you're going to try making one of these books, I recommend you make this jig. I'll publish a short video showing how I nailed two pieces of scrap wood together and put tape on them, just in case. Keeping the folded sections in order is critical, especially if there aren't page numbers. I'm using straight PVA, so there's no redos in this process. If it's upside down, it stays upside down. Getting back to the commercially made books, there's a little feature in most of these that I think's glossed over in the information I found on the internet. If you look at the inside of the fold, there's a little inward ridge. It's like a little gusset, and this is one of the reasons these books open so well. I think this is formed by creasing the pages inward after printing on paper. The paper is then laminated to card or board, which is folded. These always have a protective clear lamination over the printing, which would be done between printing and creasing. They're then gathered, laminated together, cover applied, edges trimmed, and corners rounded. That'd be a lot of gluing to do by hand. Some of the commercial processes may print directly onto the card. My first attempt at making these books was to see how thick a card my printers would print on. The thickest card I could print on was dense 600 GSM grey-green card. The printer made unhappy sounds, but it did it. The images didn't look great on this card, so I found a white card the same thickness, but there was something different about this, and the printer didn't like it, and it jammed every time. I recommend not doing this. I thought I'd broken the printer doing this last test. My next attempt was to print on the same 200 GSM paper I'm using now and laminate each sheet to 300 GSM card, similar to how I think most of the commercial processes are done. This was very time consuming even with the roller. Also, the resulting laminate was very stiff and didn't want to fold even if pre-creased. I haven't totally given up on this approach, but for now I haven't been able to produce a satisfactory result. After 2 weeks of trying to make folded card sections, I gave up on this approach and landed with what's in this video, folded sections of paper with card laminated in between. The main weakness in this approach is that the strength of the book is now in folded paper, not card, and for a children's book I see this as a real weakness. My compromise is to line the spine with a thin, strong cloth. Even if the paper splits, the book will be held together by this cloth, and hopefully the cloth will reinforce the paper and reduce the chances of it splitting. The downside is that this spine lining stops the book opening completely flat. The commercially made books have no spine lining because they don't need it since they're made of stronger folded card, and this means they can open completely flat. When laminating everything together, I started and finished with a piece of card. After everything has been glued together, I put it in the press and give it a strong nip for at least 10 minutes. This is a time when a brick probably won't get the job done. Once it comes out of the press, many of the pages will be glued together at the edges. This is quickly fixed by trimming the edges with the guillotine. I trim the book before applying the cover because the spine cover is not glued to the book, it's not tight back, and the cover material might tear out if trimmed with the guillotine. I line the spine with a thin, strong fabric. I'm using a commercial product described as starched calico. Any thin cotton from a fabric store would be fine. Starching makes it easier to work with. I have a video on this if you're interested. I wrap it around the spine, extending 20mm onto each side, which will correspond to the breakaway cover hinge point. I make it longer than the book and I'll trim the ends once it's dried. This spine lining does restrict how flat the book opens, so use as thin a material as you can. A strong Japanese paper might be okay, but it won't be as strong as cloth. You could go without lining the spine if you trust a toddler to be careful with their books. I mock up some cover art from the PDF of the original covers. It's not the greatest, but this video is to demonstrate the binding, not my graphic design skills. I print this on the same 200 GSM paper, but I want it thicker for the cover, so I laminate this to another piece of the same paper. And yes, the grain direction is wrong, but I don't have another appropriate paper, and sometimes you have to do your best. In this case, I got away with it. I cut the cover material to be oversize and I'll trim it once it's attached to the text. I measure the spine width and make prick marks outside the trim area so I know where to crease. I make the breakaway width the same as the width of the spine. I crease this in the opposite direction. I then apply glue from the crease marks out and apply the cover to the book. I let this dry under a brick. Once it's dry, I can carefully trim around the edges with my alpha knife. I designed the cover art for the first version of the book I took through to completion. I decided I wanted to change some things and made another change, and then I made another change and I trimmed it a bit shorter. The eagle-eyed may have noticed it changed size a while back. The cover art didn't fit the new size properly and it wasn't scaling well. This is why the title of the spine isn't centered. The books I've made are solid and the corners are sharp after trimming. Board books always have rounded corners for the safety of children. Some of you will know from previous videos that I have a couple of large corner rounders, but very few people will have this luxury, so I decided to find another way to round the corners of these books. Sanding sort of works if you make a couple of pieces of board with rounded corners and hold the book in a press. I decided to experiment with chisels, or gouges or gouges as curved chisels are called. There are two types of gouges, one with the bevel on the inside and an in-canal gouge, or the outside, an out-canal gouge. For this you need an out-canal gouge with the bevel on the outside and the inside being flat. I spent a fortune on chisels so you don't have to, and I found a 24mm out-canal gouge works well. A tighter radius gave a more pleasant curve on the corner, but was much harder to use. The 24mm seems a good compromise on ease of use and quality of result. I bought a very nice German-made Kirschen gouge which came sharp enough to use. Gouges can be a pain to sharpen. Even with a sharp chisel it does take a fair bit of force to cut the corner. I position the gouge on the corner, make sure it's vertical, and then push down with my weight. Using a hammer doesn't give enough control. Even if it isn't perfect, at this point a bit of sandpaper will clean it up nicely. I found this approach reasonably easy and repeatable with acceptable results. I did forget to push the record button before I did the corners on both the board books I completed. This is why I demonstrated on an old paperback I cut up in the guillotine. I did do a lot of practices on discarded paperbacks before going at the actual books. I did do a version with a cover that only broke away at the back. It didn't open as well and not good enough for my liking. This handmade version doesn't open as nicely as the machine-made ones, but I think it's acceptable. I'll continue to try and work out how to make a version as good as the robot-made ones. I don't like the robots having one up on me. If you celebrate the birth of Jesus or just love Christmas like me, you have enough time to write your own children's book and bind it as a Christmas present for your special little toddler. Until next time, cheerio.